my name is David, and today we're almost wrapping up a complete series, a 5-part series with my dad, Ron Baker. And we're at the end of a year, 2020. This is going to be posted in the next couple of days here, and
What
it's just
number is
crazy.
this? What number is this? Is this 4?
I think this is 4
Okay.
of the 5, but luckily I'm here. Here's some news for you, Dad. You're
Okay.
getting a little bit of a break on the podcast. We're going to save the last one for later, early 2021, but a little bit later because we've got some really cool guests coming on the podcast.
Oh, okay. So I'm being bumped.
You're being bumped. You're 100% being bumped. Yes.
I
I was
love
trying
it.
to put it in the most kind way possible of saying hey, your series, your 5-part special series will happen, but it's because we got some really cool people coming on.
Yeah.
So we're excited about that. So
When did you start this podcast?
it's over a year. It was September last year, 2019. So
Okay.
it's been over a year. Yeah.
Okay.
I've dropped
So
one a month every month, I think.
So you're getting momentum in the sense that
Yeah.
you're actually drawing attention of people that, write books or
Yeah.
big leadership roles, Canadian known. That's really awesome, man. I remember when you first launched this out and you just said, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
And, who knows what's going to happen. And yeah,
It's what's funny about podcasting is they say it's super simple. They're like, oh, it's so simple. But once you get down to it, it's like, man, the editing, I remember my first one, I called it the pilot episode. It was 7.5 minutes long. I said, yep, I'm just going to literally just click and post and just whatever. And
yeah,
it's not that simple. And
well, it's like those websites that say 3 easy clicks and you can develop your own website. It's like, have you ever tried those?
I actually have. I did this for the podcast.
Did you?
It was on WordPress. It's like a website design thing. It's free, and then you can pay a little bit into it. It's like 5 steps to a simple website. And then I did the 5 steps, and the website looked awful. And it was just I don't even want to tell people there's a website because this 5-step thing is just complete BS. It's not even really good. It looked like it was a grade 3 programming class did it. So, but yeah, podcasting is fun and it's interesting. But yeah, 2021 is going to be a lot of fun. Got some really cool guests coming on, and I'm super stoked about it. So yeah, you're right. You got bumped, but hey, I still love you.
Oh well, I love listening to it. So it's been great.
That's cool. That's awesome. Well, something that's been kind of switch gears a little bit. I guess we're talking about years and stuff like that. Probably going to name this episode was 2020 a bust. We're coming through a year that, man, we never saw coming.
No.
It was for me personally, it was draining. It was weird, draining, exhausting, restful, and exhilarating and exciting all at the same time. But it was kind of it was a thread of man, I've got to really pick myself up, or man, I've let myself kind of go and get lazy. And then I'm man, I really got to get myself back up again.
Mm-hmm.
So those emotions of feeling drained and then really feeling rested was kind of odd. It was a really odd year. And talking to other people, they're man, I was the same. Or it was no, this was the worst year of my life ever.
Right.
What's crazy to think is 2020, it was restful, exhilarating, exciting for me. And my daughter was born at the beginning of the year.
Just before COVID.
Yeah. And it's just it's crazy to think that this year there's been so much going on, but it's been all labeled with the title of COVID-19.
Yeah.
It feels like it's been years in ways. And my question is for this podcast, was 2020 a bust? Because you chatted about this, not chatted, you guided us through a conversation at church at Vital Point that really spoke loudly about seeing 2020 not as a bust.
Right.
But I think you did say, or maybe it was another video that we shot, it was a double blessing in a way.
Yeah, I saw somewhere early this year that 20, the image for 20 is like a bucket, like a hand. I can't remember exactly, but 2020, and he kind of held out his hand like this is a double blessing. And um, one of the things that struck me about that was it helped me shift my thinking on what exactly this year was about, how
Mm,
I was navigating it. And it doesn't mean it was easy, but I think the blessing of having our regular patterns interrupted
mhm,
and rhythms interrupted in a way that really caused us to step back and examine our lives. Those who were willing to do that, some were more inclined to, like, I had moments, man. Like I could tell you, the lockdown 1.0 in the area where I live, it was there was Friday nights
mm,
about 3 or 4 weeks in where I was saying to Desiree, your mom, I was like, okay, I've had enough. Like, I
mhm,
just need to be around people. And I had some of those moments, but I think recognizing that, it's interesting because we're a few days away. Well, when we're recording this, we're a few days away from 2021, and I think so oftentimes people, it's kind of like this, David, that people start work on Monday and they go, I can't wait for
oh,
Friday, and it's kind of like, I get the idea of that, but it's kind of like ending 2020. It's like I can't wait for 2021. Everyone's like, oh, it's gonna. Well, what's changing?
like
Like,
nothing.
what? Really nothing. What ends up changing is the things that we can control is our attitudes,
Mhm,
um our what, developing healthy patterns of thought,
mm,
how we see things. um it's unfortunate, and I recognize how difficult this is not easy. Like, there's been some really dark moments, but you can't look at this past year and go it was a complete bust. It's like you have to be able to find a way
mhm,
to maybe look back and go, okay, where do I see some of the blessings? I talked about this. What you're referring to is I talked about this. Um, when did I talk about this? Last Sunday.
yeah, last
In this
Sunday.
idea of, um, when I was a kid growing up in New Brunswick, the farmer would burn off the grass, and we would have these controlled burns, and we would go out and we would have these fires, and it was crazy, and some of them got out of control. And
I could just imagine you out there with the farmer and it gets out of control.
yeah,
You're like, oh my goodness, what do
well, it
we
was
do?
like we were just kids, right? And I look back at it now, I'm just like, what were we thinking? But the burn of the field was great because then it produced new growth.
Mm,
And if I look at the year, this past year, as difficult as it has been, the struggle's been real. I also recognize that I have strengthened my faith in my walk with God in a way that I don't think I would have, if I hadn't experienced some of the things this past year.
mhm,
And I don't expect 2021 to be any different. I think there's going to be elements of it
mhm.
that are exactly the same.
See, what's funny, well, not funny, but what's interesting about this last little while, just reflecting, and I'm a person that likes quiet time in the morning. Like, I believe that's how, like, we've got listeners right now that aren't Christians or Jesus followers. And I really believe that in a morning situation, like, to own my day well, to set up my day well, I've got to spend time
Right.
reflecting on the past, to celebrate, to mourn, to grieve, to whatever, but also to be ready for the new to happen. And I was talking to a guy the other day, really great leader in Canada, and he was chatting about how within the fire of this year,
Mm,
and this goes back to your burning situation, like burn off the old grass and new
yeah.
grass can come up, right?
Yeah.
Which was crazy. You talked about that in the message, that like next year was like grass was green as anything, but you torched it.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't make sense, right? Like you
Right.
literally killed something. And I can remember like landscaping, and we put down new sod and we would drench it, like the opposite of heat, right? Like opposite of fire,
Yeah.
to let the roots grab like deep. And then so this imagery of you talking about burning off the old grass so the new grass could come up. I was chatting with this guy, and he goes, like, right now our world is, in quotations, on fire. Like, there
Oh,
is
wow.
a literal fire going on. This is the vision he had, where there's this fire going on, but within the fire there's a new life. But the
Right.
thing is, the new life, it can happen. Like God could be like, yo, let's put up new life. But it's our job as people, as human beings on this earth, to capture that new life and carry it through the fire. So when the fire extinguishes, something's blossoming up through that. So
Yeah.
there's learnings, there's discoveries, there's failures, there's success within all of that. And I thought that was great when it comes across to the idea of like, okay, was 2020 a bust?
Right.
Like, it feels like everything's on fire. Like the news is crazy. I can't stand it. Sometimes I'll be honest, completely honest right now. I don't check the news. People will message me and be like, hey, like, what are we doing? I'm like, I'll message you. I'll be like, what's happening?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like the mindset of 2020 needs to be like, okay, what did I learn? What did I fail at? What can I change? Like, and you said like, what's going to change in the new year? But really, and I said nothing, but really a lot can change.
Yeah.
But it's going to have to start with the people as an individual.
Yeah. It'll start with you as a person, as
Yeah.
how you approach it, right? And how you take steps through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from a bigger picture, David, understanding as a person of faith is the recognition that, and the realization that no matter what I'm going through, it's like Psalm 23. I go through the valley of the shadow of death. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
I want you to think about that for a minute. If you look at that Psalm 23 very carefully, you understand that it's the shadow of death is something that you pass
Through.
through. And too oftentimes in the midst of our discouragement and our pain and our difficulty, and when life and rhythms are upset and patterns are disrupted, we just stand there. And
Mm-hmm.
if we play the victim role, if I think this is interesting, if we play the victim role in in the valley, then what happens is we end up being stuck there, and we miss the blessings that God wants to bring about. Because if I hold to the promises of God, that God, if I hold to the promises that nothing can thwart the plan of God for
Mm-hmm.
my life, I must then see the pain and the hurt as something that God can ultimately use. See, we think that, how do I say this? Oftentimes people have a mentality of God is that God is the God who smooths things out.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is that God is a God who takes our pain from a broken world in which we live in, from a brokenness and hurt within ourselves. And if we trust him, then what he can do is he can bring about the good that he wants to
Mm-hmm.
do, and nothing is going to stop that. And so,
Well, it can be stopped if people plant in the
sure,
shadow, like
sure.
stay in like
Yeah.
that, like it can be stopped in ways. I'm not saying it's like all of a sudden, like, no, it's just completely stopped. Like, don't get me wrong. But
Well, yeah. And that's true. Like
I think it
imagine,
pauses it. Like when people start saying, you know what, I'm going to plant myself. I'm staying. I'm going to be the victim. 2020 is the worst year. It's never going to change. Life is just going to suck from now on.
yeah,
And you stay there. That's when you're slowing down the blessings that God has for you. And he wants to bring life out of that situation.
right.
But it's like right now, it's like there's, and I'm not saying everyone, but it seems to be online out there. Everyone, it's just like, woe is me. We're not getting through this.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
just
And
there's a lot of that.
yeah. And I guess, yeah. And yeah, I don't know how to, I don't know how to respond to that, to be honest, because um, it's not in my makeup to pay too close attention to some
Mhm.
of that stuff that people like.
Yeah.
I'm more inclined to surround myself and pay attention to those who are consistently moving forward, or um,
No,
allowing.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
I understand what you're saying, but like, it's just like, so how do we as people right now that are the ones like yourself and myself and others that we surround ourselves with to keep moving forward to say, hey, I can make a change. It's going to start in my mindset. It's going to start in my heart. And I'm not going to allow the fire of this world to consume me, but I'm also going to be part of that new life. So how do we then position ourselves in ways to be influencers to those people that are just constantly like, woe is me, I'm a victim, this is over, I'm done. Like,
Right. I just think it's the subtlety of, okay, so here's an example.
mm,
Someone posted on their social platform, I just want to crawl in a hole and let life pass me by.
mm-hmm,
Right. And I understand the post. I understand where it's coming from. And so what I did was I just responded with something along the lines of like, man, these moments are so tough. And then I said, I'm praying with you.
mm-hmm,
Right. I didn't want the classic "I'm praying for you."
yeah,
That's the cliche Christian thing to say is "I'm praying for you." Like, well, big deal. I wanted to identify the fact that I'm praying with you. So
mm,
I acknowledge the pain. I acknowledge the moment. I didn't try to, um, smooth it over, glibly kind of look at it like, oh, you'll be fine, get over it. No, I wanted to identify with them. So
mm-hmm,
I think we mourn with those who mourn, and so we step into that moment with identifying with them, but also bringing the hope in a way that's not
mm,
cliche.
yeah,
Um, and I think that there's a way in which we can do that. And I think, you know, we've talked about this so many times. I absolutely refuse to let the news, because the news is driven by fear, and the
mm-hmm,
fear seeps into people's lives. Like, I don't listen to the news either. Like, I'll have people tell me, oh, cases are up from this pandemic, and I'm like, okay, um, yeah, great, okay, interesting. Um, but when that's where it often stops. They don't talk about, like, I want to talk about. This is so deadly close to walking a fine line,
walk it, man.
because I have had to refrain from some public perspective on this. And let's talk about the recovery. Let's talk about people that are now pushed through the testing positive, and now they're um recovered, or those who test positive that don't even show any symptoms. Like,
Mm-hmm,
it's we know someone in our circle that tested positive and had to quarantine and never showed one
mm-hmm.
sign.
But then we know
um
people that did test positive and it was like awful,
oh
but
yeah,
they
but
recovered.
they recovered.
Okay,
So
so here, okay, I just got this feeling.
okay.
Yeah, it's so we go through life and we've got these, I'm talking about like this spiritual kind of life. Like we've all got spiritual beings. Like if you believe it or don't, I
Yeah.
believe that we all have this spiritual being. And this idea of COVID-19 testing positive and having the effects, and then testing positive and not having the symptoms, um, is very much like looking into, it's like how do we go into this 2021 understanding that we're going to test positive for some really bad things this year that are mentally going to drain us, physically going to drain us, but how do we not allow the symptoms to not drag us down so we can be people that push through? Don't stand in the shadow and valley of death, of the darkness
Right.
of that,
Right.
but how do we allow those testings of positivity, like the positive testing in 2021, how do we not allow that to
Right.
destroy our 2021? So like, how do we set our priorities straight?
Well, one of the things that I said last weekend was, those who rise up in uncertain times are those who stand on the certainty of God's promise.
Hmm.
And that's not a statement that is to ignore the pain and the difficulty and the struggle that we face, because that's always been around, David.
Mm-hmm.
um, that's always been part of our lives, and we're acting like we've never had uncertain times before. It's
Yeah.
like, so it's like all of a sudden we're shocked. It's so uncertain, it's so unpredictable, and blah blah blah. And it's like, really, that's life is uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
You could drive from your town where you live into London, and all that separates you from the car coming towards you is a thin 3 millimeter line.
Mm-hmm.
you know, someone just can, be texting and cross that line, and
Hmm.
life is done. So there's uncertainty when you go into the doctors and they find something. Like so for me, this what this season has done is revealed how uncertain life really is.
Hmm.
And it's forcing us all to really examine, where am I standing in the uncertainty? Am I standing
Oh
on
man.
all this mess, all these struggles, all these difficulties, or am I standing on the promises that God's plan will not be thwarted in your life? He will, there, like,
Yeah.
nothing can separate us. Our fear of tomorrow, our worry of today, whatever that is, and it can't be gone. Like it. So I think facing 2021, no matter what comes our way, let's say it all goes away, pandemic and
Hmm.
the vaccine, and everything's great and everything's wonderful. We can all start hanging out again and just love on each other, and not wear masks anymore. And there's still going to be uncertainty. There's still going to be pain. There's still going to be hurt.
Yeah.
And so I think what we're doing is, this season of rhythm and patterns have been interrupted and have revealed for us, what are we actually
Hmm.
standing on. And that for me, and I struggle with this, because I don't want for a second anyone listening to this podcast to say, oh yeah, they're just giving kind of glib, easy answers to the struggles and problems. But the reality is, these are the promises that God gives us, that we
Yeah.
can stand on as people of faith. And if someone's listening to this and they're not a person of faith yet, they must understand that this is a season that's maybe revealed that what you're building a life on
Oh man.
is on a foundation that's not strong and durable. And it's revealed that. And maybe
Hmm.
there's an element of this person that's listening right now that says, you know what? Yeah, oh man, you're right. I have built my life on something that's like sand.
Hmm.
And now I want to build on a firm foundation, so that when the storms come and when the trials come and when the pain comes, I'm standing on a firm foundation.
Yeah.
Um, whether it's you know, test results came back horrible, or it's a family's blown apart because of divorce or addiction or whatever it
Hmm.
might be. And in the midst of it, the pain is real.
Yeah.
The pain is deep. But we must find ourselves standing on the promise and the certainty of God's promise.
Question for you going into 2021.
Hmm.
If you had like 25 to 50 people in a room and you could talk about anything going into 2021, what would you chat about?
Okay, this is interesting. I would ask them what their priorities are this year.
Hmm.
I
Now, are priorities like goals? Like that's the thing. Like I've been thinking about
no,
like, oh, like is it kind of like goal setting? But no, it's like
no. I think priorities are deeper than that.
deeper.
Yeah, I I,
Hmm.
I do believe that under the priorities you might set goals, but I think the priorities, and I actually have a leadership coach that challenged me on this. She said your 2021 priorities need to be set on December 1st, which we were a few days late. But
She already
the,
screwed up. Just
sorry,
kidding. I'm
our
kidding.
2021 is already going to be a mess for
No.
me. But one of the things she, yeah, one of the things she said was so clear, was that you only set three priorities, and then everything that you do filters through that priority.
Hmm.
So it's not a goal that you're shooting towards, it's actually what you're going to filter everything through. So I, my priority one was leadership edge, my learning leadership edge. I wanted to learn, I wanted to grow, I wanted to sign up for things. The second one was so lean into my learning edge. The second one was my leadership structure in the organization that I'm part of.
Hmm.
And then my third was just simply laugh a lot.
That's cool.
So those priorities are going to uh, help me say yes to certain things and no to certain things.
Hmm.
Because then when I get something that comes my way that goes, oh, it doesn't fit into my three priorities, I then will ask myself, do I say yes or no to this? And if I say no, then I let it go.
Hmm.
And in the midst of all this, which is interesting, this is what I would talk to people about, is the no to things, we have to be able to develop what is called self-compassion, because when we say no to things, often comes guilt and shame. I should have done
Oh,
this. I should have done that. And so self-compassion is this ability to say, I'm okay with this
mhm,
because it doesn't fit I'm okay to say no to this because it doesn't fit into the priorities of my life.
mhm. It's funny because people allow that if they do say no, it's so like I've seen in my life where I say no to those things. This year I tried my best and luckily a lot of the no's happened because we weren't allowed to do stuff, right? Um,
Blame the pandemic.
oh yeah, it bless gave it right to the pandemic. No,
Yeah.
but it's like this when you say no, it's like, oh man, and then it comes to that day, you're like, oh, I feel so bad that I'm not there, or
Yeah.
what could I have done to maybe say yes, even though I'm super busy. And it's just crazy how the no can like the thought inside of you is just like, oh, I should have said yes.
Yeah.
Like, and then you just beat yourself down, and then you're like essentially you're hurt by the way you said no.
Yeah.
And but really is I love this setting your priority straight is 1, 2, 3. And I want to talk about the third one too as well. Um, your priorities are the filter. I love that, are the
Yeah.
filter of what your year is going to be.
Yeah.
It's going to allow you to say yes, and it's going to allow you to say no, and you're not going to feel bad about either.
Yeah.
When you say yes, I said this, I found this out this last little year. I've been practicing the Sabbath, and it's really taught me how to rest. And it's been an incredible year.
Yeah.
But I had a leadership coach also that we both know. She said, learn to when to say yes and learn when to say no, and let your no be no and your yes be yes. Because when you say no, it's very much like don't allow it to beat you up. But when you say yes, you're excited to be there.
Right.
Because sometimes we say a pity yes, like, oh, it's like 2 months away. I'll say yes. I'll get geared up for it when it comes there. And then it's the day of, and you're like, man, I really wish I said no. I've got a lot of other stuff that I could be doing.
Can I give you a real simple illustration? Okay.
Love it.
This is really simple and almost kindergarten like. So I'll have people come to me and say, hey, I got a book I want you to read. For years, I would take the book and say, I'll read it. And I would never read it because
Yeah.
I just didn't. So the last few years, when people come to me with a book, you know what I often say? I'll say, hey, I could take this book, but you need to know I'm probably not going to read it.
Their face is probably like, what?
Yeah. And what has helped me is it's
Mm,
freed me from the guilt of that book sitting on my desk and not reading it. The one that they gave me. And then they would
mm,
text me, oh, I haven't had time. Or they call me, oh, I haven't had time. And reality was, it wasn't that I haven't made time. It's just I didn't prioritize the time to actually read the book because
mm.
I've got so many other things that I'm reading. So for me, it's like, okay, even that simplicity of saying to someone, hey, I could take it, but you need to know I'm probably not going to get to reading it.
Hmm. But do you think that small no on like on a book has
Yeah,
helped you with bigger things to say no to?
sure. Sure. It's the practice of the no muscle.
Hmm.
It's the muscle that gets practiced over time. But then I think it also gives you freedom
Hmm.
to live into who you are as a person, right? Rather than that person dictating how you should be behaving or what you should be doing. And
Hmm.
um, this year with my leadership, with my two first priorities, I'm going to be very strategic in what time I allow for like coffee with people. Like I love having coffee with people. I love talking with people. But the problem is that I can overload my schedule
With
and
coffee.
with coffees with people, but not have time for my leadership edge, my learning edge.
Mm,
And so I'm going to designate, blocks of time where I will say to the person, I can actually meet with you on these times. Does it work for you?
mm,
Um, Rather than me trying to work my schedule around their schedule, because that's often what I would do. And then what's happening is I'm looking at my leadership coach. She's going to have me block out all these times on my calendar, on my eye calendar, so that my learning edge, my first priority learning edge, will be able to fulfill my year, and I'll be able to do that, right?
mhm.
It's I think it's just setting the priorities. That's so if I was in a room with 25, 50 people, which would be just so exciting, wouldn't it?
Oh
To
yeah,
be able to do that nowadays.
you can't do that anymore.
And and let's strip it right down even to Jesus. The prioritization of Jesus. He would go off and spend time with the Father, and the God the Father, and he would spend time in reflection and listening,
Hmm.
and the disciples would come to him and say, hey, there's lots of people here with lots of problems and issues, and Jesus like, nah, we're gonna move on to the next town. It's like, what
Yeah.
there's all these needs, people
Hmm.
are coming, bringing people to you, and like, nah, we're going to the next town.
Yeah.
What he was saying was, I have a priority to know what it is that God wants me to do.
Hmm.
And I said this to your mom the other day. I said, you know what, I think I quit as a pastor. And she says, what are you talking about? I said, I'm going to quit being the pastor that everybody thinks I should be, or what I think I should be that
Ooh.
people want me to be, and I'm going to be the pastor that God has called me to be. So I quit.
Wow. I love it.
And we had this kind of,
Resignation letter right now.
yeah. I'm going to stand in front of the church on Sunday and go, I quit, you know?
It would, like, that jaws would drop if you said that, like that, and then literally open it up
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
I'm gonna live my life where, and a lot of us, I think, to be honest, need to say, you know what, I'm gonna quit in the way that culture wants me to live.
Right.
I'm gonna quit the consumerism. I'm gonna quit
Oh, yeah.
the constant buy, get, focus on my money, focus on my, like, all those things that I can have. I'm gonna quit that and see, what can I, like, what's God, like, teaching me to give? What's God teaching me to serve? What's God
Yeah.
teaching me to actually invest in myself? Not just to consume so people can see what I have like they have. Like, that is just, I think that's something that 2021 needs to teach people.
Well, I'm sure there's books and everything written on this out there, but
Oh, there
um,
is, but
I just think that statement, I quit,
mm,
um, would, and we understand what we're talking about. I'm not saying I quit and I'm going to walk away from my
yeah.
marriage, or I quit and I'm going to walk away from, no, it's, I'm going to quit. Here's one for you. 2021, I'm going to quit the superficial life
Hmm.
that is driven by materialism. And I'm going to drive deeper into who I am and who God has created me to be.
Hmm.
And I am going to not only allow my um, external faith disciplines to train me to be who God wants me to be, but I'm also going to allow the formation of who I am deep within my being to be
Hmm.
formed by God, so that I can grow emotionally and spiritually and mentally and physically. And I think there's elements of this that, we just got to grab a hold of that phrase. I think I quit.
Hmm.
And this is just off the cuff, but
But you know what's interesting? I think that idea of I quit, of what culture wants me to be,
right.
ties in really well with your third priority of laugh a lot.
Yeah.
Because I think you saying I quit, being this for what everyone else wants me to be, can actually allow you to enjoy life, where your third priority is, I'm going
Sure.
to laugh a lot.
Sure.
And
Because
that's
what,
where God wants us. I think God wants us to experience those emotions and those feelings of, like, enjoy life. Like, I created this world for you to enjoy, not to just get consumed by it in a terrible way.
right. Yeah. Because when we are driven by all the external pressures of this world that try to force us into its mold, what ends up happening is we have less energy to be who God has created us to be. And so when we're
Hmm.
always looking to the external things, the pressures, what we think people have on us, or our appearance or materialism, then I believe that we're less likely to laugh, because we're trying to uphold. And I think this is one of the things that social media is doing, is that we we want to put filters on our lives to represent a certain aspect of who we are, but internally we're dying, and that
Hmm.
that gap is that gap is growing, which creates this unbelievable tension in life and faith and relationship, with others and with God, and we are not living out of who God has called us to be. And
Hmm.
um, I think we should all just quit social media for a while.
Yeah, I think that's,
I'm
I
not
think
going
that's,
to, but I'm just
no,
saying.
not going to. Maybe a little bit of a Sabbath from it, but
Yeah, you
I
do
think
that well. I'm terrible at that. So
maybe I can teach you a few things about it.
yeah,
But I think that's a great way to wrap up this
sure,
conversation, is
sounds good.
heading into 2021, set your priorities straight, or start beginning to think, okay, what are my priorities for
Eh, eh,
2021?
Yeah,
And
it's not
do I,
set. Yeah, it's not setting them straight. It's
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to say straight.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I cut you off.
But like, it's set your priorities for 2021
Mhm.
so that you can live a life where you can enjoy it, you can grow, and you can invest in things that you care about. The things that like God's given you to care about. There's things that we all have different cares and passions and dreams and hopes. But when we allow the consumerism of this world or culture to influence us so much, we lose those passions and those things.
Mhm.
And I think this year, I think that quote of "I quit," but then unfolded be like, "I quit because I want to be the thing that God's created me to
Yeah.
be."
Yeah.
That's a
And
personal.
maybe there's a certain amount of freedom that comes with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great conversation, an internal conversation to have. And I would even encourage people that are listening and watching, whether you're on YouTube or the podcast audio form, of ask some people in your life to say, "Hey, what's your thoughts on 2021 and setting priorities and saying, you know what, let's find a way to move forward and not just stay in the shadow.
Yeah.
Let's walk through it and learn something about ourselves and even this world. There's like so many things you learn when you start walking through it.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible. So,
It is.
Ron, thanks so much, Dad. You the man. And I'll tell you
Thanks.
right now, people that are
Thank
listening, 2020 was not a bust for you, dude. You led so well. You were honest. You
Yeah.
were vulnerable. You were broken. You were successful in a way that God only gave you blessings to do.
Yeah.
And it's been incredible to watch you and lead beside you.
Yeah, it's
Um,
great.
so
Thanks,
yeah,
son.
yeah. And if anyone is listening, they don't follow him, man, follow him. And social media is great. It's hilarious.
Oh boy.
It can be blurry sometimes, but because the photos. Oh, I had to jab at you, dude.
Dude, I'm 51 years old and I'm trying to keep up with all you young
Look at
stallions.
that. World is telling you to keep up with us. Be you, dude. Keep posting blurry, man. I love it. Keep it going. Everyone,
Good.
thanks so much.
All right.
Subscribe, like, share it with a friend. I think this conversation is incredible for so many people to hear when we go to 2021. And I just believe that 2021 can be a year where we say, "I quit," and start living a life where you are actually walking in the midst of the darkness to find light. Thanks so much, everyone, and Happy New Year.